Welcome to Agatha Christie She Watched, our spoiler-heavy look at the movie and TV adaptations of the mystery genre's greatest writer. I'm Bill Peschel of Peschel Press, publisher of the annotated novels of Agatha Christie, and today we're talking about staged accidents, movable plasters, carnival rides, and cross-dressing heroines. We're talking about Why Didn't They Ask Evans, the 2022 adaptation by Hugh Laurie, written, directed, and acted by. But first, let me introduce my partner in marriage, as well as crime of the fictional kind, Teresa Peschel. Hello, Teresa.
Hi, I don't feel well today, folks, so I'm afraid I probably won't be as sparkly or as long-winded as usual, so we'll see what happens, which is a pity because there's a lot to say about this version of Why Didn't They Ask Evans. I think they did a wonderful job. It's surprisingly true to the text. They made a few changes, notably softening Roger. He's far more villainous in the novel because not only was he cooperating with Moira. Moira? Moira. It looks like the eye's in the wrong place. You know, like it must be because it's Irish and they don't know how to spell. But help me say that name. Moria,
like the mines of Moria.
Like the mines of Moria, even though it's not spelled correctly to be the mines of Moria. But anyway.
Or maybe it's Mora. Probably Mora.
Mora, in which case they should have said AU, but whatever. Anyway, Roger was more villainous in the novel because not only did he team up with Moira to defraud John Savage, and of course he threw Alan Carstairs over the cliff and kidnapped Frankie and Bobby at various points and threatened their lives. But in the novel, and I don't know why they didn't put this in because it really shows what a rotter he is. Roger's plan was to collect all that lovely money from John Savage's estate. He might or might not have married Moira, and what an exciting relationship that would have been. Two sharks circling each other, waiting for a weak point. But what he really wanted was to have the money and the estate, and he needed the money to repair the estate. And
right,
as
the Bassington-ffrench estate.
Yes,
this is the Bassington-ffrench family, French with two Fs.
As the younger son, he was the spare. And when Henry, his disliked older brother, had a son, that put Roger out of the running altogether.
Sort of like Prince Harry.
And Roger doesn't like it. And Roger's trying to do something about that. So you see everything that happened in the film, but remember that in the novel, the reason why Henry is a morphine addict is because when he had a riding accident, Roger introduced him to the pleasures and joys of morphine. Roger made his older brother a morphine addict. And despite the fact that Roger is reasonably fond of his nephew Tommy, Tommy stands in the way of the estate, and Tommy has had several mysterious close calls where, you fall out of a tree or you almost get hit by a car or something like that.
They didn't even mention those in the series, did they? That Tommy had accidents?
Not in this one, no.
Yeah.
Not even a whisper of that. And that was Roger again. And he wanted to make it look like, he has a subtle mind. He wanted to make it look like Tommy was accident prone. So when Tommy had a mysterious accident after the death of his father, it didn't look as suspicious. So that's our Roger. And yes, he is a charming scalawag, absolutely charming, which is why Frankie just cannot believe that this charming, zestful, full of life, joie de vivre man could possibly be the rotten scoundrel that he is.
Yes, and we'll get into that and how it caused a rift between Frankie and Bobby as well.
And I keep wanting to say Frankie and Johnny. They do make that joke in the film. It's surprisingly funny at times.
Yeah. Well, this was a production of Hugh Laurie, who, if you've seen him before, he was House on the American television series.
Which I have never seen, folks.
He's sort of a Sherlock Holmes in a white lab coat. He's also a longtime actor and writer, comedian. He played Bertie Wooster to Stephen Fry's Jeeves in the Woodhouse series.
Oh, a Renaissance man.
Absolutely.
Makes the rest of us look like pikers.
Absolutely. And this time it's the same thing because he wrote the script, he directed, he even played a role in the movie, but unlike Sir Kenny, he seems to have a good hold on his ego. especially because he's playing Dr. James Nicholson in this.
Oh, yes, because I could see Hugh Laurie, if he had the ego, he could have made himself, despite being way too long in the tooth, he could have made himself Bobby. And oh boy, that would have been icky, pretending to be young. Or he could have made himself play Roger Bassington-ffrench.
That would have been even plausible.
And that would have even been kind of plausible. No, he restrained himself, and very well, I think, because also it let him pay more attention to how the movie unfolded instead of worrying that, oh my God, my scene might be infringed on by one of the other actors. That's so bad of me.
But it's not untrue. Well, and he also is very well cast as Dr. Nicholson because he plays a psychiatrist who runs a clinic that the Bassington-ffrench family. Is he being supported by the Bassington-ffrench, or was it just coincidence they're next door?
It's just coincidence that they happen to be next door. He needed a big, huge pile of stone that could be converted into a loony bin, to use the technical term.
Mentioned in the story, by the way. So we're just quoting the story,
That's
folks.
right, folks. I don't know how he paid for it, but I guess there's some money there somewhere. And in the novel, he's besotted with Moira. Mm-hmm. He really doesn't understand what Moira is, despite being a shrink, proving that he cannot see what is right under his nose. And I thought how he handled Moira was really, really well. The actress that they hired, and this is again one of those names that is really difficult to pronounce. Maeve
Dermody, I would say.
Dermody?
Modi, probably. Maeve Dermody.
Should be more O's then. But when you see her in her close-ups, she doesn't look young. She is wearing, and they don't have to do this for a movie. Hollywood figured out all the makeup problems of covering up aging stars decades ago. And she looks old under that makeup. And as an adventuress, she has probably been around the world multiple times, used multiple men, extracted every iota of value from them, and then gone on her merry way, leaving their husks behind. I liked that because it showed that she was not some dewy 18-year-old ingenue who was not going to be capable of doing this kind of a plot. By the time you get to be 30 or even 40, you know exactly how to manipulate men. And women, too. I appreciated the way that they made her up because it looked like an older woman putting on a lot of paint to make herself look younger than she was. And if you weren't paying close attention, you probably wouldn't necessarily notice that. But she had on heavy pancake in a way that none of the other actresses did. That was one of those directorial choices, and it just really caught my eye. You know, it said that don't believe what she says. She is older than she looks. She is not necessarily who she says she is.
The story follows the novel very, very closely.
Very closely. They did
better than the 1880 version, I believe.
If you mean the one with Francesca Annis and James Warwick back in like 1982, that was faithful to a fault, to the point of being draggy. If you mean the ITV's Marple, where they inserted Miss Marple wholesale, that one leapt over the fences of the ball field and headed off to China and came back with players from China. That is a very fun movie. It doesn't fall apart until the last 15 minutes. I totally recommend that you see it, but check your brain at the door and just go along for the ride because, wow, they got gothic. Mm-hmm. They got gothic, and you get to see cages of snakes eating little mousies, orchid breeders having sex with their flowers, and then you get to see Sylvia Bassington-ffrench with a completely and utterly different backstory, and it is gothic. It is gothic to the extreme.
And I will mention, since we were talking about Moira, Natalie Dormer played her in that one, and if you remember Game of Thrones, she played Marjorie Tyrell.
Yeah, younger and dewier.
Yeah.
Younger and dewier. And that kind of character needs somebody who has been around the block a few times, because it's hard to believe that adventuresses are born from the waves of the sea, you know, like Venus from the sea foam. It takes time to hone your technique. And every year that you are honing your technique, you get older. The other change that they made to this, a fairly substantial one, is they added a new character. That is Mr. Angel. You see this looming, ominous goon. He turns out to also be working for Roger and Moira. Moira met him sometime in the Caymans, and they needed a henchman, and he was available.
He fits the bill for it because you always see him. He's always glaring at somebody, and he's in a bowler hat.
And a black trench coat.
And he's a menacing figure throughout, and it's only late in the episode that you find out. Late in the 3 episodes, because this is
2 hours and 54 minutes. But there were some other changes that Hugh Laurie made. For some mysterious reason, they turned Badger into Knocker. I don't know why. Badger is a perfectly good nickname for an English citizen. Maybe they didn't want a black English citizen to be nicknamed Badger. Again, I don't know why. But the other change was to Bobby. Now, I've seen Bobby. I've read the novel. In the James Warwick version of Bobby, he is feckless and waiting for something to happen, but he's not completely passive. And you kind of wonder how he managed in the Navy. In the Marple version, Bobby is feckless to the point of being a soy boy. And there's this scene where, and this is simply unbelievable unless he has no balls at all, that he refuses the call to adventure given to him by the damsel Frankie.
Who was played by Georgia Tennant, by the way, who is absolutely stunning.
Oh, yes. And young men do not refuse the call of adventure when it is given by ravishing damsels. Now, I understand why he ignored Miss Marple, because young men consistently ignore old ladies. I know this because I used to be visible when I went out in public 40 years ago, and now I no longer am. I'm completely invisible. It's amazing how invisible I am at the age of 62. That Bobby in the Marple episode was so feckless and such an idiot. All 3 films open the same way. You're out there on top of the cliffs playing golf. And that Bobby, the Marple Bobby, he has village girls giggling at his ineptness. That's how inept that he is. And Frankie runs roughshod over him. Now here, Frankie is more interesting because she's very aggressive. She is, sometimes I think the scriptwriters mistake rudeness for assertiveness. But he doesn't kowtow before her the way Bobby in Marple did, and certainly much less so than Bobby when James Warwick was playing Bobby. It's still not quite a meeting of equals because, of course, they're from wildly different classes. But with this Frankie and Bobby, you do get the impression that when they marry, which they do at the end of the film, and it's a very romantic sequence, this Frankie isn't going to get everything her way, and she is not going to trample him underneath her feet, use him as a doormat, and despise him for letting her.
Now, in all the adaptations, Bobby and Frankie were childhood friends?
They were childhood friends because vicars, for those of you who are not up on your English class systems, vicars are in an odd position. They're kind of outside of the class hierarchy, if I'm understanding this correctly, because they have to minister to both the day laborers in their little shacks and their families, and they also minister to the lord in the manor and his family. The vicar can go anywhere, so he is kind of outside of the class system, and they tend to be somewhat better connected. As a rule, the vicar is not the child of a day laborer who sees God. They generally don't. That doesn't seem to happen. You have to be better connected for that.
And they have some theological training, so
yes,
they have to have some education and the ability to certainly read Latin.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It would have been acceptable for Frankie to play with Bobby when they were children, because there probably weren't that many other kids in the neighborhood that she could play with, and her other choices were the children of the pig herd, or the shepherd, or the itinerant threshers,
Yes,
or
the serfs.
And that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, so they meet each other again after they were separated for a while. He was in the Navy, and I think she went away for a while as well.
She went away and did various things. It's kind of hard to guess how old they are, but they're definitely in the second half of their 20s.
Yeah.
And by now, in this culture, they should be settling down, marrying, planning a future.
Well, we do know Bobby was in the Navy, and he ended up as a lieutenant, because there are things that crop up as well, like how to throw a salute that are used as plot points and clues in this story.
Oh, yes. The clues, I thought, were really well inserted, particularly the ones regarding John Savage, because his name comes up frequently. The thing about reading Evans is it's a really convoluted plot, and it really does help to have the cast list in the front of the novel if you're lucky enough to get one, and a family tree giving all of the relationships. It's a very convoluted plot because you have your main villains, Roger and Moira. You have people who are being set up as patsies, Dr. Nicholson. You have henchmen. In this case, they've added Mr. Angel, but Amelia Kamen and Leo Kamen were also henchmen who were being paid for their part. And you have wills, true wills, and you have wills that are being witnessed by people who have never seen the man doing the will, so they don't have no idea if it's that person. And that's one of Agatha's classic tropes, too. Both the hidden couple and who you are talking to is not who you think it is.
Right. Now, there's also the backstory. You mentioned John Savage briefly. He starts out as being almost a non-entity, as just something as a comparison, because he was an industrialist who died and left millions of pounds to whoever. He
was an extremely wealthy man. He was an angler. He was a big game hunter. He lived life to the fullest, and then he met this charming, wonderful, totally disinterested in money, which should be a red flag to you gentlemen, totally uninterested in money, hot blonde. And, those shipboard romances, I'm telling you, somebody should write a novel. He took Mrs. Templeton to his home, and then he fell into despair because he knew he was going to die of cancer, and he remade his will, and then he died. He committed suicide, leaving everything to her. But the autopsy showed lots of chloral hydrate and no cancer, which is very suspicious.
But there was nothing they could do, so apparently she inherited.
And then quietly disappeared into the Grange.
That's right. And we go back to the original, and this was such a great opening to the beginning of the book, where Bobby is golfing with the doctor, and the village doctor,
different doctor.
Right, the village doctor, Dr. Arbuthnot, who's...
No, that's not Dr. Arbuthnot. Dr. Arbuthnot is the one who helps Frankie fake the accident and the concussion.
Oh, okay. So
this is Dr. Alwyn Thomas, which is a much more Welsh name.
That is.
Remember, we're in Wales here.
So, yes, it would be Alwyn. And they hear a cry, and
they see the body at the far end of the cliff.
Bobby goes down to tend to him.
And watch carefully. Bobby doesn't hesitate. This is my third version, and I watched Bobby equivocate on the top of the cliff. Oh my God, what should I do? Like some squeaking junior high schooler. No, this Bobby got laid in high school, and
subsequently he climbed down and tended to the man as best he could, and the man
opens his eyes and says, "Why didn't they ask Evans?" Bobby discovers the special keychain. Bobby discovers the fountain pen. Bobby discovers the picture. And all of these turn up later as clues. This was really well laid out in terms of a mystery. The only thing I would have wanted to really make this a mystery that you can follow at home would be a little bit more information about how Mrs. Templeton took her money and disappeared and no one knows where she went. It's a good question to ask. Why did Mrs. Templeton suddenly marry James Nicholson and hide in the Grange pretending to be a loon, except that Roger was next door? That's the only thing. And they don't really get a good idea of why she would do that, because all she had to do, no honor among thieves, was take her pile and go off to Argentina, and no one would ever know. Yeah.
But getting back to the body at the bottom of the cliff, Bobby is met with Roger Bassington-ffrench, who shows up and Bobby had to run off to church to get there at time, so Roger is left with the body. He identifies himself as Roger
Bassington-ffrench.
There's no secret here.
Because he doesn't have to worry.
Yeah.
He's there on a perfectly legitimate errand. He even has the paperwork in his room, as they discover later that he was actually looking at houses in Marchbold, which is the little town that Bobby lives in with his father at the vicarage. And Bobby was racing to church, not because he's necessarily a God-fearing young man, but because he plays the organist and somebody has to.
Yes, and he promised his father he'd be there. And it is some lovely little bits
between him and his father. His father just rolls his eyes. Why haven't you done anything with your life? What do you mean you want to be a used car salesman with that former midshipman knocker? What do you mean you want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And they're great bits of character acting. Wait till you see Emma Thomas and is Thomas or Thompson?
Thompson.
Yeah, wait till you see Emma Thompson and Jim Broadbent in great scene. They've only got like 5 minutes of screen time.
One scene.
And they make the most of it.
Yeah. And of course, Bobby meets Frankie. Frankie shows up. I can't remember the circumstances.
Frankie shows up on the moors when out there when he is doing something or other. And he tells her that he has to go off, can't you come over? No, I'm going to be working at the carnival, which was added. But that was a really nice touch because it really made it beautifully incorporated Mr. Angel and how Bobby got poisoned and why Bobby threw it all up so that he didn't die of a morphia overdose.
Yes, he's working on a ride, which we can still see today because
it looks like a tilt-a-whirl to me.
Yeah, a tilt-a-whirl.
Oh, yeah, we've been on it at Hershey Park.
Absolutely.
Very similar.
Yeah, and he was fed a poisoned bottle of beer, which he didn't realize, obviously, and he's walking the path around the tilt-a-whirl, working at the fair, twirling, making sure the
teacups are twirling at top speed.
The teacups are twirling around, and this is also an important class distinction as well because Frankie's there with her cousin and a couple of the other blue bloods.
And they know that they are slumming with peasants, and they treat Bobby that way. And it is interesting watching Frankie. You see Frankie's viewpoint, and I did not like her at the start of this show. I still don't really like her, but I have a better... I think that she realized that, she wasn't... her shit did stink like the rest of us, and that her blue blood friends could not recognize other people's value if they were not of the same class, and that no matter how classy she was, other people didn't care. She was at risk. She could actually... her golden bubble could actually be pierced by danger. And, there's this wonderful sequence where she is interviewing Mr. Miller, who owns the circus, the little traveling carnival, to find out about the bottle of beer. And she's telling him, well, why did you do that? And he's like, I don't give my employees alcohol
while they're working.
They have to work. They can't be drunk. Oh, you're going to stay in the area, of course. No, I have a schedule to keep, and he's like,
traveling carnival.
I'm a traveling carnival. And he's like this close to saying, Missy, you don't know shit, Missy. I got bills to pay.
But again, I want to get back to the poisoning attempt because he's going up, like I said, working the ride. He's walking alongside the cars. And of course, it goes up, down, and he ends up puking.
Yeah, he gives himself a self-emetic.
Yeah, he gives himself a self-emetic. Actually throws up. Frankie is helping him.
And he throws up all over Frankie.
Because that's why when he wakes up in the hospital, and it's kind of a weird scene because he's focused on Frankie humming at the window, and she has one bare foot cocked back, and for some reason the camera seems to like focusing on the fact that she has bare feet and his clothes on.
And that I really had a little bit of trouble with because the hospital is not that far from her ancestral home, and she could have sent someone for her clothes. I mean, somebody was sent to get that set of pajamas that Bobby was wearing, a very nice shades of blue pinstripes with blue piping. And somebody sent for that set of pajamas, and they couldn't send for a set of clothes for Frankie.
And it turns out she apparently likes wearing men's clothes.
She likes wearing men's clothes.
For most of the time, except for when she was taking him to her ancestral home where we meet Emma Thompson and Jim Broadbent. She was in a lovely summer dress in that one.
Yes, she was in a lovely summer dress. She has worn other dresses, but about half the time you will see her in pants, which is sort of period appropriate for her class because people of that class did whatever they damn well pleased.
Pretty much.
But I still don't think she would have gotten married in pants.
Yeah. There's that too.
She would not have done that. And I guess maybe it was the director making a joke about who's going to wear the pants in this family. I don't know. But I really can't quite buy that wardrober's choice.
Yeah. So they decide to investigate the Bassington-ffrenches. They discover some connections going on here. And as they go to the village, they discover that the victim was there as well. and they recognize the peculiar keychain.
Yes, the peculiar keychain.
From
and
the pub.
There's a wonderful sequence where they are testing out how Frankie is going to wreck the car in the wall. And the village idiot who comes by is absolutely accurate, just like he was in the novel, that doctor couldn't have been there. And again, this is a clue for Roger that Lady Frankie Derwent is not what she claims.
Yeah, and that was brought up by Dr. Nicholson as well.
Yes.
Hugh Laurie being his best house impression of just, this does not make sense.
This does not
tell us what is going on here. And yes, it ends up with a long conversation between Frankie and Roger. They go for a drive in the country. And
this is one of those instances when Frankie realizes she doesn't have control because Roger damn near wrecks the car and there's nothing she can do to stop it. Mm-hmm. And she is not in control. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I think she comes away with from this particular case is that she is an amateur and she doesn't have the control that she thinks she does. The world does not bow to her will.
So we have Frankie meeting with Roger repeatedly, and we have Bobby, who is enamored of Moira. Maybe not too enamored, but he definitely has that. He wants to rescue her.
He wants to rescue the damsel.
Rescue.
And Frankie doesn't need rescuing. She makes it very plain. Go peddle your papers, kid.
That's true. So they have some really good discussions. And again, this is where you can get subtext. This is the good example of subtext in fiction, because they're not going to say they're in love with each other, Frankie and Bobby, but they're clearly jealous of each other's attentions being paid to someone else.
Oh, yes, because Frankie can absolutely see that Moira is a liar and a gold digger and a fortune hunter. And Bobby can clearly see that Roger shouldn't be trusted any further than you can throw him. And it doesn't matter that he is this tall, dark, and handsome and ultra charming. None of that matters. He is a liar and completely untrustworthy. No, he is not completely untrustworthy. What you can say is that Roger can be depended on to sting you like a scorpion.
Yeah.
Roger can be depended on to... what is the phrase that I'm looking for? You can count on Roger to cheat.
You can count on him to always let you down.
Yes, that's it. You can always count on Roger to let you down. This is why people have scripts, folks, when they do the smoother podcast. But we're doing all of this off the cuff, and that's why I sound like an idiot.
This is authentic. We're authentic idiots.
Oh, is that what it is?
That's right. 100% gold minted. It also reminds me of when Bobby plays the chauffeur and how it was different from the Julia Mackenzie episode, the Marple episode.
Oh, he felt very uncomfortable. He didn't know what to say or do because he hasn't observed very many chauffeurs, whereas I got the distinct impression with the other two that the other two Bobbies had seen chauffeurs occasionally and had some idea of how they were supposed to behave. Our Bobby didn't have any idea what a chauffeur was supposed to do other than drive the car.
Yeah, show up at the front door with Frankie, which is not what chauffeurs do.
Oh no, they wait by the car. They drop you off at the front door. They haul all the luggage to the front steps. They may ring the bell for the lady so she doesn't actually have to sully her finger by touching a doorbell. Then, when the door opens, they quietly disappear with the car into the garage and, go to the kitchen and get a sandwich and a cold one.
Yeah, but he learned.
But he learned because
he did end up going into the kitchen, and actually there was a lovely little byplay as well when he asked the old cook, how long have you been here? And it was, what was it?
10 years. And he said, oh, so you're 24? And she just blushes and laughs because, a handsome young man being charming always works.
Yep. And yes, he makes friends.
But occasionally throughout this, you see that this Bobby is not a feckless soy boy. He is an action hero. He is out of his depth in the social world of Frankie and the Bassington-ffrenches, but he is in there doing his best.
And he learns along the way. And I think that's part of what is interesting about the Bobby and Frankie's first couple of scenes together, because she is throwing him, absolutely saying whatever comes. I equated it with Peter Wimsey.
She was rude. She had no concern for his feelings at all.
Yeah, there's that too. But at the same time, there obviously is some friendship there between them, and she had to learn to pull back, and he had to learn that he could fight back.
Yeah, he had to say, you can't treat me like that.
And it's just a fascinating byplay between two people from different worlds and how they can come together.
So much about this was so good. Beautiful costuming, gorgeous houses. For those of you who really enjoy your English country house porn, this is just loaded with linen fold paneling and crenellated ceilings and one absolutely gorgeous building after another. Yeah. Gorgeous double staircases, the kind of entry hall where you stand at the bottom and you look up 4 stories high, and all of these lacy balustrades, just absolutely gorgeous. You know, it moved along smartly. Everybody had a chance to shine. You get to know Dr. Alwyn Thomas well enough that you're shocked and horrified when you discover that he has apparently committed suicide by hanging himself. They all felt real. Everybody felt real and not just a cardboard character from central casting coming on to move the plot forward for our hero and our heroine. And it all tied together, I thought, pretty well. And that was always the problem with the ITV's Marple, is that plot just vroom, vroom, vroom. You know, like there was a Lamborghini on the road, and then at the last 15 minutes, they yanked the engine out and replaced it with some Volkswagen engine. And it just completely fell apart. The plot completely fell apart, which was really sad. But this one, everything works from start to finish.
Well, and especially the end as well, because you do have Frankie and Bobby kidnapped and in durance vile and being threatened. And I couldn't remember very much from the previous adaptations what was going to happen, except obviously they were going to survive it, but they were going to be rescued. But there was nothing they could do. Bobby is strapped into this electric chair used to do electroshock therapy.
Now that was again a thing that I would wonder is, how did they get that chair from the loony bin over to the separate house on the other side of the county? I did wonder about that.
There was that, yes.
But I understood how Knocker worked, because in the James Warwick Evans, Badger followed them, and Badger comes crashing through the ceiling and rescues them, and that's what happened here. You can't go for any verisimilitude of text to the Marple version because they leave that behind in the first 3 minutes and then acknowledge incidents.
But I think all in all,
totally worth seeing.
This is totally, yeah, absolutely. It was a well done adaptation. It was faithful to the book, but it didn't drag. There were new stuff in there that was introduced. You know, we got to see Knocker as a character. There was the doctor I misidentified, Arbonat. He had his moments as well, because he was the doctor who treated Frankie after she crashes into the gate.
Oh, even the lawyer, Mr. Bragg. I shouldn't say lawyer, the barrister, because, you know, that dry sense of humor about, I guess, you know, pretty young ladies do indeed get wills made in their favor by rich old men. And there was even a cat. There was a kitty cameo. There was a kitty cameo at the very end when they are interviewing the former cook, Mrs. Pratt. And there is this fluffy black Persian winding underneath the table legs.
So I think this concludes another episode of Agatha Christie She Watched. Thank you very much for showing up. Visit our website at peschelpress.com to see about our appearances and our line of complete annotated Agatha Christie mysteries, from Mysterious Affair at Styles to the murder of Roger Ackroyd.
Yes, and Bill did a beautiful job on them, and I'm not just saying that as his wife. He really did do a beautiful job. And thanks again for joining us.
Agatha Christie She Watched is Teresa Peschel and Bill Peschel, produced by Bill Peschel. New episodes come out every week wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/mystery and leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on Mystery She Watched, email Peschel at peschelpress.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to Peschel at peschelpress.com. And thank you for listening.